Hello, and welcome to the Collegium, our monthly magazine program in 3 parts: cinema, state of affairs, and our arts calendar. For our cinema presentation, we will produce Black People, Black Berlin. For our state of affairs, we will present an interview with Alfred Prettyman that was conducted at the Humboldt University in the Studio Buna during the 14th Black International Cinema. Last but not least, our arts calendar. Parts 1 and 2. Parts 1, Aicy, Mané and the Slic, Chic dancers. Part 2, Ewa Nolte-Majda and Les Chants. So, whatever you do, be cool. And last but not least, remember, you are participating in the Collegium.
In the 7-9 coupe. For all my gang affiliates in the hopping 68s, this one's from me to you. Well, not the underdog, call me the wonder dog. I keep it cracking while I'm stacking in this game called rapping. Now I kick up my feet like I kick a rhyme to a beat, and every time you see me on the streets, I got some heat. Hell yeah, it has to be. And everybody wanna know what's up with me and Master P. For your concern, you knew it wasn't no gimmick when I got into some gangster shit and told you wasn't no limits to the things I'm gonna do. Now it's really going down with the DPGC crew. Well, Daz did the beat, Corrupt got the heat and Trady. He laid the hook and Superfly played the keys. It gets no realer than this. From the LB to down south, add more killers to this. Entourage, Southwest, oh yes, we in charge and we'll pull your card. No disrespect or disregard. Life in the big LB is getting hard. So my squad gon' mob and drop bombs. Ring the alarm, we cause somebody harm. I make you scream, I make you shout. Come on, the party people, let me turn you out. Cause you know I'm all about the hoes, money, and clout. And I rock from Long Beach City all the way down south. I make you scream, I make you shout. Come on, the party people, let me turn you out. Cause you know I'm all about the hoes, money, and clout. And I rock from Long Beach City all the way down south. Miami, where it's hot. Do this.
they used to say. Major moves were being made to integrate the schools and society at large. New terms like discrimination and civil rights were being born. As fate would have it, I just happened to be at the right place at the wrong time. I told the Memphis Board of Education that my reason for wanting to go to an all-white high school was because I wanted to learn how to speak Russian. Of course, the transfer was denied. And now I can't speak a Russian. But as I look back, it was a blessing in disguise. I was exposed to some of the greatest black minds of the time. I remember my father saying to me, darling, you must not only exceed, but you must excel that blonde child sitting beside you. And of course, I pondered on that. My principal said to me every day, you have an obligation to your race that you must fulfill. And I pondered on that. I was elected most talented in the senior class, and it was an honor. But I also found that it was a great responsibility. This was a time when race pride was deeply ingrained and deeply instilled, and I don't believe that the fires will ever die.
Berlin, a cultural, historical crossroads in Europe, is home to a population of black people from various parts of the world. Their struggles and aspirations reflect a quest for the heightened consciousness necessary for psychological, economic, and the political awareness required to ensure a greater participation in the decisions affecting a people's destiny. But how do the black people here in Berlin maintain their consciousness in this ever-changing world?
Just to give an example, it would be what Fountainhead is doing in Berlin to raise consciousness. For example, Black Film Festival. I mean, that's new in Europe, you know, and that is for me a form of raising consciousness. For example, there are very many black Germans who also run into identity problems living in this society. And I was amazed how many of them were at the film festival. And one asks herself, why are they there? And it's because they're interested in what is going on. They want to know who they are. And this sort of gives them an area or an arena where they can also, a platform rather, to express themselves. They feel they belong. They do not feel that we are just swimming in between. Black people can express themselves. After the films, we have a discussion, most of the time, lively discussion. You know, that is where you learn who you are, what you are. We exchange views. We do not feel then isolated. We do not feel, oh, I'm in the society. I have to try very hard to be this, what they want. You are you.
So I think that now the African is making effort to, he sees that he has been distributed also all over the world. You know, Russia and all of the East Bloc countries, all over the world, he is there. And as a result of that, I think that he has found the necessity to form a network where that he's able to communicate. And this, as was mentioned before, is very important, that there is a common ground on which to communicate, on which to associate himself with.
High time black people get to understand that we are all from the same land and shouldn't be divided by Babylon, because Africa is our black man destination. We should stop the war down South Africa. where black people endlessly suffer. Man, high time.
I've noticed even to this damn day, when there's an anti-apartheid meeting, and we go to it like Black Women's Day, there's another black South African girl and I. The first question, it was not what do you women try. Why are you dressed the way you are dressed? How can you afford it when you people are starving and stuff like that? Those are the questions that even to this day we get from German public. It's how I portray myself.
So then when the people address you, then whose needs is it that they are addressing?
Their needs. They want to feel this feeling of being needed. They want us to support their superiority complex. They need us to need them. Otherwise, they have no justification for their superiority complex. And that is why this perpetuation of all the time, and that is why they even try very hard amongst the black people, especially in the case of Africans, to keep these unseen chains in our heads where we must continue feeling inferior, because otherwise they will have no excuse for that type of behavior.
This is a very obvious question. It's not poor because they are lazy or because they don't want their people to have a better living. It's because of the condition, the world condition, which has made them to be so. All of these countries, not most of them, all of these countries were colonies. It means at first we were being ruled by the colonial governments from Europe. And everything that was being produced in these countries were only for the benefit of the colonial masters. When these countries started fighting for their independence, something else came, and that is they got their independence not on a silver platter. They had to fight for it, and they fought hard with bloodshed. They sacrificed in fighting for it. But in the long run, when the colonial masters saw that they were going to lose these countries altogether, they thought otherwise. Okay, we should give them independence, that is political independence. We will not be there, but they will take over power as they think. But we will still be the controller of these countries. So, most of these conferences which we are having in the what is the name of the Champs-Élysées in France?
Yeah, Champs-Élysées.
Champs-Élysées, and in Lancaster, and in Whitehall, these leaders of ours used to go there on these conferences to discuss about independence. The problem was they were being given conditions that if they get independence, they must always be having relations to these former colonial countries, governments. So if a country like Kenya went there, that is Kenyatta and the others went to Lancaster, they sat there and they told him, yes, we'll give you independence, but you've got to fulfill these conditions, this condition, that condition. You shouldn't have trade relations with any other countries without our wish. You should always have good relations with us within the Commonwealth. That what came in again. And if you do that, then we give you independence, which means they created a kind of situation where colonialism remained. But now this colonialism was a colonialism of the new type. So this colonialism is now known by the term neo-colonialism. These countries are neo-colonial in that these people are just figureheads. They're sitting there in this government, and all the important aspects of these countries are being decided still in these countries, especially on the economic issue. So that the economic development in this country is totally dependent on the former colonial government in Europe.
But we've all been colonized. Before that, there was enslavement. We all know the problems that face Africa, basically. The next group would be, who I relate well to, would be people from the Caribbean. They are very proud of their roots, of coming from Africa. Here I have to take the comparison to a Black American. They do not look at Africa as being jungle, being in the backwoods. I've never known someone from the Caribbean asking me, can I find a place where I won't have hot water so I can really see what it's like to live in the jungle where there's no electricity, which I've gotten from Black Americans. I've never found this with people from the Caribbean. I notice even things they go back to. I met somebody from the Caribbean. Even trees, wild trees, the leaves they picked from to make tea. They were proud of all these things. They were proud of what it meant to be African. When they meet an African, they embrace you, as an African, as somebody who they almost look up to, which is not because they look up to, but it makes you have a really good feeling. If you look at their poetry, it all relates to Africa. If you look at even the political, even the movement of the so-called Rastas has African roots in it. Coming to the Black Americans, there is of course a difference. There are those who have been exposed more, who have traveled a little more. Naturally, those are the ones I can relate to very well. There is no problem. But the majority of Blacks in Berlin, particularly, from America, are in the military. And my basic feeling is, I look at it as how South Africa has tried to rule and divide the Blacks within South Africa, saying you are so-called colored, Asian, and you are pure Black. And the Black American here in the military sort of looks at himself, hey, because even though I came as a slave, but I got honored actually to be brought here as a slave. Now I'm an American.
You mean America, America, America? America, 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 who supports South Africa, the murderer President Botha. In America, 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 America. It only causing disaster, America. America only causing disaster. America, America, America. America, America, America. But America only causing disaster. In America, America, America. In America, America, America. You're just another number in a damn computer in America.
Here are people who are living the other side of the Atlantic, the western side of it, and others are living on the eastern side of the Atlantic. This separation has brought other problems of environment and distance. Because they are the west of the Atlantic with differing environments and developments, they had to face the situation and adapt themselves with that situation, but they never forgot where they came from, because they didn't go there on their own will. The over 200 million people from Africa who went there were slaves. As such, they were not very happy to be in that area. We see it in their spirituals, we hear their lamentation.
Uncertainty. I use that word because a lot of Africans are not familiar with us at all, and I'm not familiar with a lot of Africans. I haven't had much contact with them, although I would like to.
Right from the time they entered the States or Latin America or the Caribbeans, we're hearing their voices up to now. This shows that it is very difficult to supplant a human being from where he was born. So we have much in common as far as our feelings are concerned. We have the same feeling in spite of the separation, in spite of the adaptation which has taken place. In the 19th century, when Africa was being colonized, the Africans faced the same situation of oppression, just like their brothers and sisters in the other side of the Atlantic. And this brought them even nearer, because now the African was faced also as an oppressed in his own continent. So you find that their feelings between these two are the same, their wishes are the same, but the approach of doing it may differ from one angle to another because of this separation of distance.
Well, certainly, Africa was the homeland, if you will. I think there again, geographically so, there has been some degree of separation. And because of the unwillingness, or let's say unavailability, if you will, of material and information in the early 50s and throughout the 50s and a portion of the 60s, there were certain moves that were going on to bridge that gap. And of course, I think now the world, if you will, is wide open. And again, many of those misconceptions have been broken down. We have been able to realize that there have indeed been struggles going on both continents and indeed across the world.
There again, I think that it's a matter of our culture, our character, our culture which influences our character, and what we are able to exemplify as a black or as being a non-white. We could say that by virtue of saying that I'm a black American doesn't necessarily differentiate me from a black African unless I'm doing something different from that African. The general philosophy of a black man was adapted from the philosophy of Martin Luther King, which actually alleviated violence, but more or less a certain intellectual preparation. And that was the attack. That should be the weapon. That was his philosophy, that blacks should equip themselves with a tool which could not be taken away. And intellect was one, know-how. And I think that this became one of my favorite philosophies of life at a very early age, which eliminated for me the possibility of attracting certain conflicts with myself, certain hypotheses which had been believed by blacks. There was at one time that blacks couldn't play certain instruments because their hand was too greasy. There were many things which we were told at early ages about blacks that if one didn't know any better, you would have had all types of complexes about yourself. The potential of yourself, the stability of your person as a black, because of the fact that there were special efforts made to show that we were quite indifferent from white people. However, I think the philosophy which I was availed to at probably the right time in life, 15, 16, 17 years old, made me aware of my potential as an individual, made me aware, first of all, that I was a human being, that I was able to execute and do anything anybody else could do.
listen, baby.
And when I get a chance here, let me clear my
Anything's possible. Anytime you want it, girl, let me know. I won't ask why, just let it go. Do your thing, baby, take control. On my knees, just say the word. No request is gonna go unheard. I'll take my time when I'm loving you. Foreplay at 1, 1 till 2.
Here we go now.
Tell me what you want. Tell me, baby. Tell me what you need.
The flavor of the rhythm I wrote.
Tell me,
Here we go now.
what you want. Tell me, baby. Tell me what you need.
The flavor of the rhythm I wrote.
Tell me, just go.
Here we go now.
We're alone. I'm up in your mix if you put me on. Talk to me, I'll understand. Your need is gentleman. Now, girl, it's not my style, I cannot lie. You know I like to serve it on the freaky side. What you want, I can't ignore. So tell me what you're looking for.
Here we go now.
What you want.
The flavor of the rhythm I wrote.
Won't you tell me?
Here we go now.
Maybe it's the clothes you wear, Versace, I don't know. And you know, when I lay down, I can get your body spin. Yeah, telling me to kiss you till your knees get weak. All night, working in the bedroom, baby. In the bed or the middle of the floor, baby. My love guaranteed to make it go crazy. Saturday night,
The flavor of the rhythm I
loving
wrote.
you
And when I get a chance here, let me clear my
Welcome to another session of the Collegium, where we are presenting the 14th Black International Cinema Berlin Cottbus. We're very pleased to have a special gentleman with us today, visiting here at the Humboldt University at the Studio Bühne. Welcome to the Collegium, Mr. Alfred Prettyman.
Thank you very much.
The gentleman has just published a new book entitled The U.S. Intercultural Nation, second edition. And he's written an article in there entitled The Ring of the Bell Curve, Critical Reverberations and Resonance. Could you tell us a little bit, first of all, about your background?
But that takes too long. Let's short-circuit it and say that at the present time, I'm teaching at Ramapo College of New Jersey. This second edition of the book, Us, U.S., the Intercultural Nation, is an effort to get not only citizens of the U.S., but others, to look more closely at the reality of mingling as quintessentially American. Americans tend to be quite ethnocentric, and in that ethnocentrism, they adopt a kind of national identity that seems to overlook the multiplicity of cultures that are the real composition of American society. So the effort of the book is to call greater attention to that. I am an interculturalist. I'm working in intercultural communication and intercultural relations. Communication has been the binding theme of all the work I've done professionally. I have run my own publishing company. I was for a number of years an executive editor of social sciences and humanities at Harper & Row, and I worked for a while as a senior trade editor at McGraw-Hill, but I've taught at Rutgers University, at a community college in New York State, part of the State University of New York, and am now at Ramapo College of New Jersey. So that's it in a nutshell. I'm a graduate of Hamilton College in New York. I studied at Cornell University, the Baruch School of City University, and at the Institute for Intercultural Communications of Antioch University.
How does the work that you're undertaking, say, impact upon the situation that we've been reading about a lot over here with the Diallo case in New York City and the relationship between the authorities and the various communities?
That's a good example because it's not just the police who have a problem dealing with non-Caucasian males. There is a problem of perception with regard to non-white persons in general in American society, in U.S. society. One of the things that's clear from the Diallo case is that the police were seized by something that is best described as race rage. It's like steroid rage, but this is a matter of conditioning. And it was a surge of this emotional race rage that made possible this extraordinary fusillade at a man whose only crime was not that he had a weapon or seemed to have a weapon, but that he was black. And that the police did not understand the context of his response. Within his own culture, his response would have been understood. Not looking directly at someone, backing off. If police, as well as ordinary citizens, had a better appreciation of the cultural context of other cultures, if they could shift context, then these kinds of problems would not be so prevalent. But there is very little opportunity, or let's say people don't avail themselves of the opportunity to do this. How could they do it? They could do it by getting to know people of other cultures. To get to know people of other cultures means you have to spend time with people of other cultures. You have to get to know the intergenerational problems, the gender problems, the political problems, the economic problems. You have to understand more than how their food is different from your food and how their dance is different from your dance. You have to spend real time with them, and you have to make an effort to learn about their culture. Most citizens of the United States don't think that's necessary because they really anticipate that everyone should understand their culture and that their culture is a measure of what culture should be. And so a lot of effort has to be spent breaking down this national ethnocentrism and getting people to look more closely at the opportunities they have for getting along better with people who don't look like them, but who are very much like them if they spend some time with them, and coming to take seriously the real differences in cultures which require them to behave differently and to expect different kinds of cues from people who are not of their culture.
When one takes into consideration the history of the United States and the many opportunities that have been available to the various people of the United States to undertake what it is you've just described, the question, it seems, occurs to me is what is to be done to motivate the people to undertake the kinds of interfacing and intercultural exchange that you've just described?
I don't think there is any one thing. The shock will motivate them, such as the Diallo case. If their children are lucky enough to break out of the concentric circle of their own ethnocentrism and to venture into other cultures that can motivate them. What ought to be more motivating is that there is an increasing sense that we do live in a global village. What I tell my students is that our destiny is inextricably tied to the destiny of every other economy in the world, so we can't afford anymore not to pay attention to who comprises the cultures of these economies. And as we see more and more collective action by groups such as the UN, NATO, whatever the coalition is, the coalition of different cultures and nationalities, the more we see that in the news, and we see it nearly all the time now, perhaps the closer the realization will come to the average citizen that this is something they have to pay attention to if they're really going to understand what's going on in their own economy, much less in the economy of other countries. But I don't think that there is any one way that it can be done. Some people may be led into investigating another culture by their music. It may be by dance. This festival has an enormous impact on inducing people to look more closely at all kinds of black cultures. I mean, that kind of thing can be an inducement. But there is no one way.
When we look at the situation, when you talk about NATO or we talk about the globalization, the economic globalization, we see that there certainly is communication. There are attempts to establish organizations such as the World Trade Organization, the United Nations exist. But on the other hand, you have a situation, for instance, with the United Nations, where that to some extent they are held, if you will, hostage by the over $1 billion that the United States still owes them. Now, how is one to encourage a collective mindset or a community of action between people when many of the examples that they see are one of community of action as long as one group or one perhaps economic interest is calling the shots?
Good question. That's hard. If you look at the example of the debt that the U.S. owes to the UN, that money is being held a political hostage by two Southern senators with a very unsurprising history. Not even Ted Turner, making a public display of donating an amount equal to American debt to the UN, can get the Congress to move off the dime and do what it should and pay that debt. It's very political, and it's tied up in partisan politics that has nothing to do with the real appreciation for the issues that the UN has to deal with. And then there is also the arrogance that says that the UN should be run the way we want it to be run, as you suggested.
You've told me a little bit about your plans, your research that is planned for Berlin and perhaps other parts of Europe. Perhaps you could inform our audience a little bit about your future undertakings, present and future undertakings.
Yeah, since my first visit to Germany over some 30 years ago, I've been fascinated by many aspects of the culture, not the least its music, which I've sung a great deal of in opera and concert. My current focus is on what has happened since the end of occupation with African Americans in Berlin. I'm interested to know if the problems of acculturation, that is, adapting to this culture while maintaining their own, and marginalization are similar to problems of acculturation and marginalization of blacks in America. It seems to me that this is an extraordinary period in which to do such a piece of research, because since the reunification of Germany, many things are changing. So it seems to me that the patterns that are established now will have a great deal to do with ongoing patterns as this city and this country becomes increasingly an international center, if not the international monetary center of Europe, and many, many more different people begin coming into the city. And the necessity for dealing with them in a very intimate way becomes more pressing.
I realize you haven't conducted your research yet, but I didn't realize you'd been off and on visiting here for 30 years. And a question occurs to me. Why, in your opinion, do you have so many people from the United States, from Africa, from the Caribbean, who have left their countries and who now reside in Berlin or possibly other European countries?
You don't have the daily oppression of racism that you would have in other places. I can only speak for the United States, but those with whom I have spoken here who are African American from the States point out that they're here because it's easier to live. The prejudice, the behavior that is not complementary, the sheer social pressure is that they face in the U.S. is simply not here.
How then, with this acculturation process that you're going to be studying, how then do you think the parents are going to prepare their children, or how would you suggest, or the parents prepare their children for perhaps, if one could describe it as a schizophrenic existence, or one could describe it as a binational, bicultural, cultural, biracial existence of perhaps parents that come from the United States and another parent that comes from Germany? How are those issues to be dealt with?
That's what I'm trying to find out. And it's a fascinating issue, and it has to be an intercultural existence. It has to be an intercultural identity. There is an intercultural reality. We just have to accept it. I have a grandson who lives in Germany. My daughter lives in Berlin. So this is part of my interest in the whole issue, but it really goes back to my wondering what happened to the offspring of American GIs after World War II. So one of the things I eventually want to get to is whether or not the situation with regard to those who have stayed since the end of occupation is similar to that of those children who grew up here after World War II. What became of them? How are they assimilating? How are they acculturating? Are they marginalized, and in what kinds of ways? That's what I'm interested in.
I noticed that you distinguished between assimilation and acculturation.
Absolutely.
That's a very important distinction. Perhaps you'd like to elaborate a little bit more on that.
Assimilation means that you totally take on the identity of the culture you're in. I think that that's not possible here, because in order to take on the culture you're in, you would have to turn white. I think that's one of the problems that we face in the USA. When people say, we want you to be a part, we want you to assimilate, that means for people who are black or of color that you must become white, and that's the wrong standard. But the issue in the U.S. is different in ways that I'm very clear about. I'm not sure of just how that runs in Berlin or the rest of Germany at this point.
Alfred Prettyman, I want to thank you for coming on the Collegium, joining us here. And once again, it's the U.S. or Us Intercultural Nation, second edition by Alfred Prettyman. And I believe it is published by
McGraw-Hill.
And by the way, for those of you who can come up with some bleach cream that will solve this skin color problem, believe me, you can make a lot of money. So stay with us, and remember, you are participating in the Collegium.
fish are jumping, and the cotton is high. Oh, your daddy is rich, daddy is with, and your mom is good looking. So hush, little baby. So hush, little baby. Don't you cry. Don't you cry. Don't you cry. One of these mornings, you're going to rise up singing. Then you'll spread your wings, and you'll take the sky. But till this morning, there's nothing can harm you. With daddy and mommy, standing by, summertime. And the living is easy. Fish are jumping. The cotton is high. Oh, your daddy is rich. Oh, I know. Your mom is good looking. So hush, little baby, baby, baby. Don't you cry. Ooh, one of these mornings. You're going to rise up singing. Then you spread your wings. You'll take the sky. Till this morning, there's nothing can harm you. Ooh, with daddy and mommy, daddy and mommy, they standing by. Stand by, yeah.
Baby, send the kids to bed. Spend the time with me instead. Here's our chance to be alone. no friends, no phone. See, time has passed, I know. You and I always on the go, but now we must take some time to do things on my mind. Oh, I've just got to make love. I wanna make sweet love to you, girl. Now the time has come to share the pleasures of love. Our bodies feel inside. It'll be wonderful. It'll be marvelous. And you know I just wanna love you so tender. Oh, I need to feel every part of you. In spite of all the things that our lives go through, and if by chance that you don't believe, then baby, I gotta say that our love is real. See, I'm your man, and I've just gotta let you know that I wanna give you so much pleasure.
Uncertainty. I use that word because a lot of Africans are not familiar with us at all, and I'm not familiar with a lot of Africans. I haven't had much contact with them, although I would like to.
On a clear day, rise and look around you, and you'll see who you are. On a clear day, how it will astound you that the glow of your shines every star. You'll feel a part of was thinking the other day, sort of reminiscing, if you will, about a woman that I fell in love with a long time ago. Well, this was a very special woman. You know, I thought I was pretty cool too, smooth as it could be. But when I met this woman, well, I found out that I wasn't quite as cool as I thought I was. She was beautiful, intelligent, talented, but she was powerful. There was something very strong about this woman. But over a period of time, she decided to show me her vulnerable side, and we came together. Man, it was wonderful. But of course, there's a sad side to this story too. And the sad side basically was my fault. I'll tell you about it. Deja vu. How I'm so in love with you. My deja vu. Deja vu. How I need to be with you. My deja vu. Well, as I was saying, I don't know, I made some mistakes and I caused us to come apart. I did everything I could think of to win that woman back. I remember one day I was doing a modeling assignment in New York, and we were on a tall building, and I was in so much pain because I was separated from this woman, I could hardly hold myself together. And I remember looking down